Hello, everyone, and thank you for participating in the Lytham Partners Spring 2022 Investor Conference. My name is Joe Diaz. I'm a managing partner at Lytham Partners. For this presentation, we welcome Actinium, which trades on the NYSE American exchange under the ticker symbol of ATNM. Representing Actinium today is Steve Oloughlin, Chief Financial Officer. Steve will run through a slide presentation and we will engage in a brief Q&A session afterwards. Before we begin, for those not familiar, Lytham Partners is one of the country's leading investor relations firm with more than 2 decades of corporate access experience. We've built one of the industry's most diverse and effective platforms for connecting small cap companies and high quality and focused institutional investors. One final item before we begin, I want to remind you that Steve will be available for one-on-one meetings later this week. If you have not already signed up, please visit the Lytham Partners website at lythampartners.com/virtual and click the one-on-one meetings request button. With that said, let me turn the proceedings over to Steve Oloughlin, Chief Financial Officer of Actinium. Steve, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Joe. Let me pull up my slides. Hey, good morning, everyone. Pleasure to be here. Before I begin, I just want to make a disclaimer and safe harbor, as I may be making forward-looking statements in today's presentation. I would encourage everyone to reference our SEC filings, which may be updated and amended from time to time. Actinium is a late-stage biotechnology company. We believe we're on the cusp of clinical success that will allow us to realize our vision of creating a fully integrated specialty oncology company built on our innovative R&D capabilities. And those capabilities really rely around the therapeutic area of targeted radiotherapy. I mentioned that we are a late-stage company. Our lead asset, Iomab-B, has completed patient enrollment of a pivotal phase 3 trial, which we call Sierra, in the 3rd quarter of last year. And we have top-line data from that phase 3 trial expected in the 3rd quarter of this year. We also have our Actimab-A clinical program, which is being tested and studied in multiple clinical trials currently. We believe Actimab has potential to be a backbone therapy in a blood cancer known as acute myeloid leukemia, particularly for patients with relapse or refractory disease. Our Iomab program, which I'll get into in more detail, we believe is a multi-indication product, and we have several inroads and efforts ongoing currently to expand the potential indications of Iomab, including a clinical collaboration with Memorial Sloan Kettering, for which we've been awarded NIH grant funding. We also have, underpinning our clinical programs, a technology platform that we believe is leading edge innovation in radiotherapy R&D. We've been advancing and investing in our technology platform, and we're very proud that we have established multiple collaborations, including with Astellas Pharmaceuticals, top 20 global biopharmaceutical company, Epicentrix and Aveo, and I'll detail some of that in just a bit. We have a strong balance sheet, approximately $78 million in cash as of December 31st, 2021, which provides us with runway to achieve many key milestones, including delivering phase 3 top-line data this year and supporting a BLA filing to hopefully support FDA approval. Now, I mentioned our technology platform, and really the company was based on technology we licensed from Memorial Sloan Kettering. We have advanced this over the years under our stewardship. We have a IP portfolio of over 170 patents, and we believe we have differentiated capabilities in the targeted radiotherapy space. Essentially what we do is we take small bits of radiation, which is one of the most validated weapons against cancer. We put it onto delivery vehicles and we deliver it inside the body at cellular levels to try to address the unmet needs of cancer patients. We have worked with multiple validated targets. We work with multiple isotopes. What we like to say is we're agnostic both the delivery vehicle and the isotope. What we're focused on is creating the best possible medicines for patients. We're working in several areas: conditioning for stem cell or bone marrow transplant, developing targeted radiotherapy in combination with other modalities. We're advancing into solid tumors and then next generation technologies. Quick snapshot of the pipeline. I've highlighted most of this, but Iomab-B, fully enrolled phase 3 trial. The clinical collaboration with Sloan Kettering, we're also starting to work in the gene therapy field. Our Actimab program is being studied in 2 clinical trials. A trial with CLAG-M completed enrollment last year, and a trial in combination with venetoclax is finishing up dose escalation, both of which we expect to advance into phase 2 studies, and we will be providing development and regulatory updates on the Actimab program. And then, as I mentioned, collaborations around our technology platform with Astellas, Aveo Oncology, focused on solid tumors that are HER3 positive, and Epicentrics, where we are combining targeted radiotherapy with Epicentrics' novel CD47 SIRP alpha small molecule inhibitor, which we think is highly differentiated in the field. So I mentioned targeted conditioning, and with Iomab-B, that is our focus. So conditioning is in the context of bone marrow transplant or stem cell transplant. It's also be utilized in cellular therapy such as CAR-T and gene therapy. And essentially what conditioning is you have to prepare or put the patient in a position where they can receive these therapies. What you have to do is try to address their underlying disease, and then you also have to address their immune system so that their body does not reject these cells. Now, the way conditioning is done today is with non-targeted chemotherapies and external radiation. Because they're not targeted, they come with side effects and toxicities. They're associated with a risk of failure and mortality. And as a result of that, we believe that there is an access gap in the patients who could receive these therapies. And in the case of like a stem cell transplant, this may be the only potentially curative treatment option for these patients with relapsed or refractory blood cancers. So we believe there's an opportunity to increase access by delivering a targeted therapy that's better tolerated, more efficacious, and that's what we're seeking to do with Iomab. To quantify this opportunity, in the blood cancer space alone, there's over 175,000 patients diagnosed with blood cancers each year that are potentially treatable with a bone marrow transplant. However, there were only 23,000 transplants performed in 2019. So significant access gap that we are looking to address here. With our targeted radiotherapy approach, the reason why we can address bone marrow transplant, cell and gene therapy, we're able to essentially attenuate the intensity for the desired application. And the other aspect is the target that we go after. So we target a protein called CD45, which is expressed on all blood cancer cells. It's also found on immune cells. So we're able to simultaneously address the patient's cancer and address and deplete their immune system, 2 of the requirements to move forward to a transplant. So we think we're unique in that regard. We licensed Iomab-B from the Fred Hutchinson Cancer Research Center based in Seattle, Washington. They're a pioneer in the field of transplant. They have been awarded multiple Nobel Prizes for their work in the medical field. And prior to us licensing Iomab, they had studied this in about 300 patients in 11 clinical trials and 6 disease indications. And now we're, of course, executing the Sierra trial. But what the teams at Fred Hutchinson Cancer Research showed was that patients receiving Iomab were able to go to transplant and outcomes were improved. So in this particular patient population, relapse refractory acute myeloid leukemia patients, what they showed in one study was a 30% 1-year survival and a nearly 20% 2-year survival, which compares favorably to the current approaches routinely given to these patients, which has a approximate 10-year, 1-year survival, and unfortunately a 0%, virtually no survival at 2 years. So we looked at this data after licensing Iomab, and we met with the FDA, and we designed what is our now fully enrolled pivotal phase 3 trial. This was a 150 patient study. It randomized patients either to receive Iomab in a transplant or physician's choice of salvage therapy. There is no standard of care for this patient population. So there are 20 agents that can be used, either a single agent or in combination, again, based on what the physician feels is best. Primary endpoint for the study is 6 months durable remission. One thing that we're very proud of is the Sierra trial was conducted at 24 leading bone marrow transplant centers in the United States and Canada. These centers account for about 30% of the transplant volume and include centers such as Memorial Sloan Kettering, MD Anderson, Mayo Clinic, and several other preeminent comprehensive cancer centers. We fully enrolled the Sierra trial, so we're able to share data from the study. The data that you see on this slide was presented at the American Society of Hematology annual meeting last December, and it details data from full enrollment of the study. I'd like to direct your attention to the middle column, headed with BMT engraftment. And what that shows is 100% of patients who received our drug Iomab-B were able to go to a transplant, and they engrafted, which is the first sign of a transplant success, without delay in less than 30 days. That compares favorably to the control arm, where physician's choice of therapy only allowed 17% of patients to go to a transplant and engraft. So a greater than 5x difference in access to transplant. As you move to the right, we were able to follow up patients 100 days post-transplant. And what you see there is lower rates of 100-day non-relapse transplant-related mortality in patients receiving Iomab-B compared to control arm. So as a result, there's an approximate 5 times difference in the number of patients potentially evaluable for the primary endpoint, which is 6 months durable complete remission. I'll also point out patients who fail to get a remission and go to a transplant on the control arm are able to cross over and can still receive Iomab-B. The boxes at the bottom of the slide in yellow detail that patient experience. And we're very excited that despite receiving an additional round of therapy and failing, the patients who crossed over and got Iomab still had 100% access to a bone marrow transplant, and also had a lower non-relapse related mortality compared to patients who received traditional therapy. So we're quite pleased with these results. They've been consistent throughout the study at all of the interim analyses that we have conducted. They've also been consistent with that large body of evidence that existed and was generated at Fred Hutch prior to us licensing Iomab. Also, I mentioned that this is a targeted therapy. What we've seen so far are lower rates of certain serious adverse events, including febrile neutropenia and sepsis. Sepsis, in fact, we showed a statistically significant difference where there was lower rates of sepsis in the patients who received Iomab-B compared to salvage therapy, which we believe, again, speaks to the targeted nature of our drug. And this is addressing a potentially large patient population. There's approximately 10,000 patients with relapse or refractory AML each year. And despite 9 drug approvals for AML, this is a patient population that has an expected median overall survival of only single-digit number of months. And certainly there's a significant unmet need. However, a transplant can be potentially curative. So that's what we're seeking to do with Iomab. Increase access for patients to a potentially curative bone marrow transplant and improve outcomes, namely extending survival for patients. So we will be delivering top-line data from the study in the 3rd quarter of this year, and we will submit a BLA filing with the FDA in the first half of 2023 that we hope will lead to an approval. I mentioned we're expanding Iomab's use in other therapies, one which is CAR T, which is a type of immunotherapy. And we're collaborating with Sloan Kettering, who has developed their own CAR T therapy. And we were jointly awarded NIH grant funding to conduct this trial. We believe that we will be able to generate proof of concept data and present that this year. So an exciting expansion opportunity. And when we look at Iomab, what we like about Iomab is this multi-indication potential, both in several blood cancers where a transplant is utilized, cell and gene therapy. And regardless of what indication or what procedure we're looking to facilitate, these are all administered in large hospitals. This is a concentrated commercial market. There's about 50 centers that do 75% of the transplant volume. Similar concentration in Europe and Japan, which are large addressable markets for us. And the transplant market is expected to grow fairly rapidly over the coming years. So we think that we have a number of tailwinds at our back and very much looking forward to providing additional updates. I'll just quickly touch on Actimab, which is our second clinical asset. This is a targeted radiotherapy targeting a different target, CD33. Broad applicability for patients with acute myeloid leukemia. This is a very targeted therapy, and it's a differentiated approach. So blood cancers like AML are highly sensitive to radiation. However, it's difficult to treat them with radiation as it currently is delivered today from outside of the body because their blood cancer is spread out. It's not as if you're hitting a solid tumor that's located in a single point in the body where you can direct a radiation beam in it. But what we believe is if we can deliver the radiation at the cellular level inside the body, we can now use this very potent, very effective radiation modality to treat the patient's cancer. So one trial that we conducted, and we completed enrollment of this study last year and presented data at the American Society of Hematology, is with a drug regimen called CLAG-M that's routinely used in patients with relapsed refractory AML. And CLAG-M, does a pretty good job. It has about 54% response rate, but we felt that this could be improved by combining with Actimab-A. What we've shown is that by adding Actimab to CLAG-M, overall, what we showed was a 67% response rate, but at the phase 2 dose that we'll be taking forward, there was a 100% response rate. And in addition to that, we looked at patients who achieved MRD negativity. MRD stands for minimal residual disease. So what this means is the patient does not have any level of detectable disease at very, very finite levels using very sensitive detection methods. We showed a 72% MRD negativity rate in patients who got the combination of Actimab and CLAG-M compared to 39% with CLAG-M alone. So those deep remissions, we believe, are important. And we're very much looking forward to continuing to develop this combination study, and we will have updates this year. We're also studying Actimab in combination with venetoclax, which is an approved targeted therapy for patients with several different blood cancers, including AML. We are in dose escalation phase of the phase 1 portion of this phase 1/2 study. We believe we have identified the phase 2 dose, and we will be providing an update this year. But we've seen some interesting signals from this study thus far, including a 67% response rate in patients with a certain type of mutation called TP53, which is associated with very, very poor outcomes. So we're very intrigued by this signal. These results confirm some of the mechanistic synergy that our team had uncovered, and we'll be providing an update as we advance this into the phase 2 portion of the study. And we believe Actimab, as I said, has the potential to be a backbone therapy in AML, addressing the needs of patients who are both fit for more intensive therapy, who would receive CLAG-M with Actimab, and the unfit patient population who would receive venetoclax in addition to Actimab-A. And we see multiple opportunities beyond these two combinations for our CD33 program, including with immunotherapy, which we're starting to investigate with our CD47 collaborations, and then also with cell therapy. and we'll be providing additional updates as we make advances in these areas. So when we look at our clinical pipeline of Iomab and Actimab, we believe we're addressing the needs of patients with AML, relapse or refractory disease, highly underserved patient population, and believe this will be the first kind of step in building a specialty oncology company whereby we're delivering targeted therapies to the major cancer centers who treat patients with advanced disease. And we believe with a differentiated approach of targeted radiotherapy, we can potentially positively impact patient outcomes. So as we look ahead for the remainder of 2022, a number of milestones expected, namely the top-line data from our phase 3 Sierra trial and a BLA filing next year. We'll also deliver on our CAR-T program with proof of concept results. Expect to continue to make inroads with our gene therapy efforts, providing development and regulatory updates on our Actimab combinations, and continuing to advance our technology platform, building on the 3 collaborations that we have, and continuing to advance our mission of building the leading specialty oncology company, leveraging our targeted radiotherapies. So thank you all for your time and attention. Happy to take any questions at this time.
Steve, thank you very much for that overview. Looks like a lot of exciting things going on there at the company. A couple of questions here. From your perspective, what is the competitive landscape for Iomab-B? What else is out there that you're working through?
Yeah, so Iomab is a very unique drug candidate. To our knowledge, it's the only targeted radiotherapy being developed for multi-indications in conditioning. As I mentioned, conditioning today is accomplished with non-targeted chemotherapies, which are largely generic drugs, cytotoxic drugs that have been around for 50 years, and then external beam radiation. So they're toxic, associated with a lot of risks, including mortality risks. We believe that they limit access to these potentially curative treatment options. There are several or a few other companies that are now starting to work in the conditioning space. Companies like Jasper Therapeutics that are developing monoclonal antibodies, Magenta Therapeutics, who's developing antibody drug conjugates for targeting CD45 like Iomab or CD117. But these are earlier in development. They're just entering human clinical trials now. So we believe, that we've completed a phase 3 trial. We have the potential to be first to market. We do have orphan drug designation, which would get us market exclusivity, both in the United States and the EU. So we feel very confident in our position, and we believe that our targeted radiotherapy can deliver very strongly for patients.
What is the addressable market for Iomab-B?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's about 21,000 patients diagnosed with acute myeloid leukemia, and unfortunately, it has the lowest survival rates of any blood cancer. It's one of the most aggressive cancers, and unfortunately, a lot of patients simply don't respond to therapy or they relapse. So those relapsed and refractory patients are the ones that we are addressing with Iomab-B, and we estimate that there's approximately 10,000 patients per year with relapse or refractory disease, of which currently less than 500 receive a bone marrow transplant. And that's really the patient population that we're looking to address, are the patients who have this relapse or refractory disease where a transplant is the only potentially curative treatment option, but they're obviously not accessing transplant as much as they should. So that, 9,500 patients plus the 500 or so patients who are getting transplant, those are the patients that we're focused on. But Iomab is potentially applicable not just to AML, but other blood cancers. So we see tens of thousands of patients potentially addressable with Iomab-B.
In terms of Actinium as a company, how different is it from other radiopharmaceutical companies? What are you guys doing that's different than everybody else?
Sure. A couple of things. Our focus on blood cancers with our current clinical programs is something that I think differentiates us. It's not something that a lot of the other developers are working on. They tend to be focused more on solid tumors. Also conditioning is something that, is unique to us. Also, I think it's our kind of approach overall to development. As I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, we're really and truly agnostic to the target. We're agnostic to the type of targeting agent. We're agnostic to the isotope. What we're focused on is combining all of those components to create the best therapy for patients. And I think now what you're starting to see from Actinium, as our R&D efforts are really hitting their stride, now we're moving into solid tumors to complement our blood cancer clinical programs. We've been working with Astellas now for a while on theranostics for solid tumors. Starting now the work with Aveo Oncology for HER3. So I think this is emblematic of what you can expect from us going forward, is a very kind of creative, innovative approach to developing targeted radiotherapies to address patient populations, who are not adequately served by currently available therapies.
So, with regards to all these programs that you've got in progress right now, what is the company's cash position, the anticipated runway? How do you see things developing going forward?
Sure. We're in a good position from a balance sheet perspective. We just reported our 2021 year-end results. The cash balance was just shy of $78 million. We anticipate that to provide us runway into 2024 based on planned operations. So we're very happy that we're funded through several key milestones, starting with the phase 3 top line data coming later this year, a BLA filing, making advancements with our technology platform, being able to develop a clinical and regulatory development strategy for our Actimab-A clinical program. So we think we're in a very strong position to now deliver value.
Sure. And let's finish up with getting a feel for what you see as your upcoming milestones. What's out there for investors to look at?
Yeah, sure. So with Iomab, one thing that I haven't highlighted, we presented data from full enrollment at the American Society of Hematology conference in December of last year. We're going to be presenting a kind of a data update, if you will, at the Transplantation and Cellular Therapy conference that's being held at the end of April. So in just a few weeks, we view that as a real opportunity to highlight Iomab to the transplant physician community, and really, give us visibility and kind of a forum to highlight the upcoming top line data, which can support a potential approval. So that's something that the company is very excited about in just a few weeks. Continuing to advance our technology platform, continuing to expand our inroads into the cell and gene therapy space, and then delivering that top line data results later this year for the phase 3 Sierra trial for Iomab-B. And then it's really exciting to have potential opportunity to have an approved therapy. Not many biotechnology companies get to this point, so being on the cusp of that, we're very excited for the future for Actinium.
Exciting times for Actinium. Steve, thank you for your time, for the information. I think there's a lot of good things to look forward to, and we greatly appreciate your taking the time to share it with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciated the opportunity to present here this morning.
And to anyone out there that has not already signed up for a one-on-one meeting with Steve, again, please visit the Lytham Partners website at lythampartners.com/virtual and click the one-on-one meetings request button. We hope you all enjoy the rest of the conference. Have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Be well.